Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network and iHeartRadio. Welcome to Hunting for Answers, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Hunter, and today we're highlighting a case that began in Petersburg, Virginia. On a summer afternoon in 2022, a 19-year-old woman returned home from grocery shopping with family members, including two young nieces. She was just steps away from her apartment door, but as she approached the entrance, gunfire broke out. As the gunfire erupted during a confrontation between others, she was struck once in the chest and collapsed. She was not involved in the dispute and was not the intended target. This is the story of Toni Knight. Toni Charmaine Knight, known to her family as Stinka, was 19 years old. She was from Dinwiddie County, Virginia, and had recently moved into Artist Space Lofts, a newly opened apartment complex in downtown Petersburg. Her mother, Diane Branzel, described Toni as the most genuine, intelligent, family-oriented person you could ever meet. Toni was the glue that held her family together. She doted on her young nieces and cousins, doing their hair, taking them on outings, and showing up for the people she loved. She was well loved in her community, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Saturday, July 2nd, 2022. Shortly after 12:15 in the afternoon, Toni had just finished a grocery run with her family. They returned to Artist Space Lofts on Perry Street. Toni was walking towards the entrance with two of her young nieces. They were about to walk inside. Then, gunfire. Inside the building, according to testimony, tensions escalated rapidly. Three young men crossed paths in a stairwell. 19-year-old Devin Mitchell was leaving the building alone. 20-year-old Josiah Flowers was inside the building with family members and a 16-year-old friend, Keyshawn Hicks. Mitchell and Flowers knew each other. According to testimony, they had attended Hopewell High School together, and prosecutors said long-standing tensions between them had never been resolved. When they encountered each other that day, the situation quickly turned volatile. At trial, both men testified in their own defense, and each claimed the other initiated the confrontation. Mitchell testified that he believed Flowers and Keyshawn Hicks were reaching for weapons. Flowers testified that Mitchell threatened him. Surveillance footage of the encounter was used and replayed at the trial. Because there were conflicting accounts of what happened in those moments, the question of who spoke or who acted first remains disputed. What is clear, based on the evidence presented, is that within seconds, guns were drawn. Prosecutors argued that all three men participated in the gunfight. Court records show that both Josiah Flowers and Devin Mitchell fired their weapons during the confrontation. According to the Virginia Court of Appeals, Flowers fired multiple shots, and Mitchell fired more than a dozen rounds as the encounter unfolded. The gunfight moved from inside the building toward the front entrance. Outside, just steps from the door, Toni Knight was about to walk in. Toni was shot once in the chest. She collapsed outside the apartment building on Perry Street. Reports confirmed that others were also wounded during the shooting and survived. One of Toni's nieces remained with her until first responders arrived. Devin Mitchell, who had also been shot, was located by police a short time later near the scene. Toni Knight did not survive her injuries. Toni's mother, Diane, would later speak publicly about her daughter's death, saying, "They took my baby's life. She was going home to cook and do her niece's hair, and she didn't get to make it inside because of other people's nonsense. The community rallied around the family, and Petersburg City Council passed a resolution allowing a memorial mural to be created in Toni Knight's honor near Artist Space Lofts. On July 4th, just 2 days after the shooting, Delvin Mitchell was arrested. On August 1st, Josiah Flowers was arrested by Petersburg police with assistance from the U.S. Marshals. Shortly after, police took into custody a third suspect, 16-year-old Keyshawn Hicks, in connection with the shooting. All three were charged in connection with Toni Knight's death. Prosecutors said the fatal shot came from Mitchell's weapon, but they argued that all three men were legally responsible under Virginia law because they engaged in what is known as mutual combat. On November 18, 2022, all three defendants were indicted. Keyshawn Hicks, despite being 16 at the time of the shooting, was tried as an adult. In 2023, Hicks accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison, with 23 years suspended, leaving 10 years to serve. The cases against Delvin Mitchell and Josiah Flowers went to trial together. In June 2023, they appeared before a jury in Petersburg Circuit Court. At trial, the Commonwealth presented evidence and testimony against both men, and each defendant presented his own defense. The proceedings were contentious, with each side challenging the other's version of events. On June 9, 2023, the verdicts were read. Josiah Flowers was convicted of second-degree murder, along with multiple firearm-related felonies, including shooting into an occupied building and malicious wounding, among other charges. Delvin Mitchell was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and several firearm-related offenses. Both faced significant prison time. At sentencing, Toni's mother spoke directly to the court. She said, "I have to ask for the max because I didn't get the max time with my daughter." Toni's uncle, Frank Branzell, also addressed the court, describing the lasting impact the shooting had on the children in their family. He said the girls, who were present that day, were deeply traumatized, adding that their social lives had all but stopped and that they struggled to return to school. On December 1st, 2023, Josiah Flowers was sentenced to 92 years in prison. 42 years of that sentence was suspended, meaning he will serve 50 years in prison. On March 12, 2024, Delvin Mitchell was sentenced to 30 years in prison. 15 years was suspended, leaving 15 years to serve. At his sentencing, Mitchell apologized, saying, "I understand they want me to face my max time, and I deserve it." Judge Martin said he believed Mitchell was sincere, but noted that he disagreed with the defense's suggestion that Mitchell couldn't have walked away from the confrontation. 1 year after Toni lost her life, on July 2nd, 2023, about 75 family members and friends gathered to mark what her mother has called Toni's Angelversary. Diane Branzell told the crowd, "She's well loved a year later, and I want her to continue to live through everybody, to continue her legacy and her love." Our thoughts are with the family and friends of Toni Knight. As we close out this episode, remember that sharing Toni's story helps us understand just how quickly innocent lives can be affected by senseless violence in our communities. For updates on this case and others, follow Hunting for Answers. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Until next time. Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network. For more podcasts from the Black Effect Podcast Network, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.